of what I said before. And in this new series of conversations, we invite artists of our collection to talk about things they might want to have told us for a long time, or about things we would have liked known from them for a long time. And the series starts with Cornelia Sollfrank, who is presented in our collection with the famous net.art generator. And Cornelia has proposed to us to use the new format to present her just published book, Fix My Code, in which she engages in a dialogue with the programmer, artist, and researcher Winnie Soon. And it is a wish we were very happy to fulfill, as the book addresses key issues that concern us with regard to our computer-based works. I may say they concern us or even keep us awake at night. A few words about the evening schedule. The designer and publisher Janine Sack will start briefly to say something about the book and the structure of the book. And this is followed by a conversation with Cornelia Sollfrank, Winnie Soon, Morgane Stricot, and Mathieu Vlaminck, moderated by Annet, Dekker. And if you're watching via YouTube, you can ask questions to the participants in the chat. So let me briefly introduce tonight's conversationalists. That's Cornelia Zulfeng. She's an artist researcher and university lecturer who's based in Berlin. And the key subjects in her works are digital media, network culture, and new forms of political organization and authorship and intellectual property, gender and techno-feminisms. So she's also co-founder of collectives like Women and Technology, Innen, and the famous Old Boys Network. And she currently does research at Zurich University of the Arts in the field of art and commons. Then Winnie Soon is an artist, researcher, coder, educator, who was born and raised in Hong Kong. They is interested in queering the intersections of technical and artistic practices as a critical feminist queer praxis. And they is a co-initiator of Code and Share and a co-member of Critical Software Think Collective, researching in the areas of software studies and computational practices. And Winnie is currently based in Denmark, working as an associate professor at Aarhus University. Morgane Stricot is a senior digital and media art conservator at ZKM. Her research focuses on the contribution of media archaeologies as a complementary theory for the conversation and reconstruction of media technical works of art. And she's also part of the media archaeological artist collective PAMAL group. Mathieu Vlaminck is a digital and media art conservator at ZKM, and his current specialization is the preservation and restoration of 3D computer-generated cinema models, especially Star Trek ships. And Mathieu's research focuses on the preservation of digital art. Annet Dekker, who will moderate this evening, is assistant professor in media studies, archival and information studies at the University of Amsterdam, and visiting professor and co-director of the Center for the Study of the Network Image at London South Bank University. And she has published numerous books, journals, and is the editor of several volumes. And her recent monograph, Collecting and Conserving Net Art, is a seminal work in the field of new media conservation. And now I hand over the word to Janine Sack. She works as a publisher, art director, and lecturer in Berlin. And in 2018, she founded the ebook publishing project Eclectic, digital publishing for visual culture. And in 2017, the artist book publisher, A Book Edition. And so please, Janine, we're very much looking forward to learn more about Fix My Code.
Thank you very much, Margit. And thanks for having me here and having this book presentation. I'm very pleased with this ebook. It's been when I started Eclectic, it's been one of the handful of projects which I had in mind, which I wanted to kind of have a publishing platform for. Cornelia Sollfrank and I have actually studied together, so we go back a long time, and I was also part of 2 of the artist groups mentioned. So we have a long-standing private and professional relationship, and I've been following the net.art generator project for many years. And in some conversation, it came up that she was cooperating with Winnie Soon to fix the broken net.art generator in 2016-17. And we, in several conversations, we decided that it would be a really interesting publication, and we kept talking about what kind of form this should take, and finally arrived at this conversational form it has now taken. And I will share my screen to show you just a glimpse of the book. Yeah, I can see you are seeing it now. Sorry, I have to find my screen so I can actually see it myself. So we have here the title of the book, and what I would like to just give you a very brief introduction to is the structure. So what was one of the key interests for us was that we wanted to make this publication very approachable, and we wanted it to make something which is both interesting for experts, different fields which this book touches upon, but also for people who are maybe non-tech related, who would rather be scared away if it sounds too techy. So I think what's really a great success is that Cornelia and Winnie managed to talk in a way that you really get sucked into the whole thinking process and this process of understanding what this net.art generator and the whole discursive field it touches brings us to. So this, sorry, the structure of the book, we have a short introduction where we get an idea about what this project is at general. So we have one early example of one of the images generated by the net.art generator. And we have here some sketches as well, which were done in the process. So we can get also a glimpse of the thinking process of, in this case, Winnie. She will be explaining in a video in the ebook as well how she went about to approach this programming language as well. So we have a couple of diagrams where we can kind of see how the net.art generator is structured, and which we can access later when we read more about it from any part of the book via the table of contents. We also have a timeline which kind of shows the long process which it went through. You can see it started very early in 1997, so you can kind of follow a little bit the path of this whole development. We're starting off with a couple of mails, which are user mails to Cornelia Sollfrank about the usage or the failure of the usage of the net.art generator, which gives a good insight in the whole communication around it as well. And then we are having 4 chapters, which are the title are very explanatory. We have broken code, we have service not available, collaborative creation, and caring collectively, as to which then kind of reveal the different aspects of the thinking process around it. I think this is already enough about the structure. We can go back to the book. I'm just showing you very quickly a couple of the images of the installed. This is an installation which was in Museum Tingeli. It's a bit similar to the installation. Here we have another installation picture from actually the installment of the ZKM. And also here we see of one of the workshops which actually took place at ZKM, where Winnie and Cornelia and Morgan were talking about the whole conversational aspects. But I also want to, as a last mention, I want to thank the Aarhus University Research Fund for supporting our book. The book is published as Creative Commons, so you can download it for free on the Eclectic website, and we're very happy if you do so. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Janine, and also to all the others, and ZKM, of course, particularly, for having us here, and for the audience. And I hope, being the moderator, that you also pose loads of questions in the YouTube chat or in any other place that you think will reach us. And we're happy to take questions. I do have quite a few questions of my own. It's like multiple pages here. So if you don't come up with anything, I have plenty to go with, but I hope you do, because I think it's important to involve you as much as we can. There's two lines actually in the book that really stuck with me, and I've been reading it backwards and forwards, actually going really both sides in the same time. And one of them is that it says, despite its apparent simplicity, the net art generator is able to connect to new discourses, to exemplify them and make them graspable. And the other one is, the processes of creation involve various human and non-human actors, and they crystallize around the issues that capture the most energy, that is, attention at the very moment. And with these two sentences, I think are a really nice introduction to what I hope is going to be a really interesting discussion between us. Because I think they actually capitalize on many of the issues that I want to bring forward today. And maybe to start off, because I'm not sure everyone is so familiar with the net art generator, I want to ask Cornelia, could you tell us a little bit more? How was the idea of the net art generator? How was it born? And what was its first version?
Mm-hmm. Yes, hello everybody. Welcome to our book presentation. And of course, it's great that you can be here. And I also would like to thank again Janine for really making the initiative for producing this book. How the idea was born, it's like, you know, often it was coincidence and it was never meant to be a project in its own right. It was, so to say, a side product of something else, and which was also one of its first interventions, its first usages as a conceptual tool. It was in '97 when the Hamburger Kunsthalle decided that they want to kind of get hold of net art, and they launched the first museum competition for internet art. And I was critical about this because it was a time when we still had this utopia that the internet would be a space in which we could create our own laws and our own ways of art, which are completely independent from the traditional art world. So I thought I was not pleased about this gesture of the museum to kind of nominate or to celebrate the best net art piece or the best net art. And so therefore I flooded the museum with 300 fictitious female net artists, hoping that they would not be able to cope with so many applications. This is, of course, today 300 doesn't sound much. We are used to other numbers, but it was not clear at the time if the process would be automated and so on and so forth. So they were accepted, and in the next step, I had to deliver artworks, you know, net artworks of the 300 fictitious net artists, and I started to randomly copy and paste HTML code and save it in a new file. And what it displayed on the browser looked quite fancy. It looked, as I thought, like people would have thought net.art looks like at the time. So I submitted all these works to the competition, which is a different story, how all this ended, which I'm not going to tell now. But I found it actually interesting to, after I'd done that for quite some time, you know, to manually copy and paste, we started to automate this process and go online and with the script and capture HTML code and automatically copy and paste it together. And this was basically how the idea was born, because I found this process quite interesting for many reasons. You know, in the first idea was that it kind of connect back to chance operations, to this idea of collage, of randomly combining elements that would then produce a new meaning in the new constellation. And so I thought this was like the first step in continuing this sort of really very important innovation of the 20th century into the digital age. So that was first thoughts and experiments around it. And I ended up doing 5 versions altogether with the same, so to say, algorithm, the same idea of going online, capturing material, recombining it. So there was different versions during the time that were focusing either on images or on text or on whole websites. And the only one that survived so far is the NUC 05, net.art generator 05, which is the one that combines images and makes image collages.
Mm. Now, I mean, it's amazing in a way that it survived for so long. 25 years is almost like eternity in net.art speak, I would say, in net.art lives. I mean, what kept you going for 25 years to keep coming back to this work?
Yeah, it's not like that I didn't do anything else over 25 years. It was there, and it connected to different discourses. And I didn't really have a plan from the beginning of what I wanted or how long it would last. It was really doing one step after the other, trying out something and leaving it behind for some time, because it's a very stable program. So once it's up and running, it just runs and does its service. And there were years where I didn't really do much about it. And then all of a sudden, at one point in 2004, I ran into copyright problems with automatically generated images. One of this that we can see here in the background, it's probably easy to recognize that it has something to do with the Warhol flowers, this collage. So people thought this could not be part of an exhibition because it would infringe against Andy Warhol's copyrights or the foundation's copyrights. So that took me on a whole journey where I was exploring the relationship between copyright and art and aesthetic theory and legal theory and how they both influence each other. And I was very fascinated by this discourse because what is a long-standing interest of me is to explore the notion of the original. What is an original, which is such an important notion in the art world and on the art market, and related to preservation and conservation as well. So what is this original? And with that, and I think that the digital tools that we received in the mid-90s with the internet and with this way new programming languages and all that, and to create art with that, of course, shifted this whole discussion about what is an original, which maybe took also new levels through photography and art and through video art on a completely new level. And that is what kept me going, you know. And with the original, of course, the question of authorship. And for me, this is basically paradigmatic with the net.art generator. You have this is a very easy to use tool online on the website, and you have two two places where you can type in the name of an author and the title of an artwork, which kind of simulates like the paradigms, you know, of art and art theory and aesthetics, is the author and the original work. And of course, if you have an identifiable author and you have an original work, then it's of course also a copyrighted work. So this question, what happens if a machine does this, and making it even more complex, it's not just a machine, but it's a machine people are interacting with, and people are not, and what is this machine? It's not just a machine, it's a programmed machine, so programmers were involved, and so on and so this complexification of the question of authorship and of what is an original in this context is something that really kept me going for quite a while, for many years. And I was busy with this copyright discourse, but it was not the only one. So there were other interventions as well.
That's great. We'll come back to these issues, absolutely, tonight. I want to stop by what you said in the beginning, in a way. It's like, oh, it's a very stable program. And I'd love to hear Winnie's view on that. How stable is this program? But moreover, also, I'm quite curious indeed what your interest is with the net.art generator. I mean, we're talking about different generations, different backgrounds, different cultures. How do you guys come together?
Thanks. I guess it's responding to the question about the stability. Although the title of the book is called Fix My Code, it seems like a very static or fix, and then, you know, it's solved, it's done, right? But I guess it's both Cornelia and I have that in mind, is we are fixing something that is immediate, the error is immediate, but we also see the uncertainty. We know this is the recurring problem that will show and repeat again at some point. And why it is unstable? Because there are a lot of reasons, right? The reasons, one of it might be the server upgrade, maybe because we are using the Google search API. And also there are even, you know, the 5B version has launched in August in 2017. But actually there were like different iteration of changes as well. And Google changed again, you know, in between, and then we keep on fixing basically. So I guess it's the title of the book, Fix My Code, actually has a hidden contingent meaning of keep on fixing, you know, in that sense. And regarding why we come together, it was because a couple of years ago, Cornelia was in Aarhus University as a visiting researcher. And then I noticed her work on net.art generator, which is very related to my research interest in software art practice. And especially this notion of generativity, because I think in the art world, there are also different types of generative arts. Some may be related more to like rule-based, generated from few rules, and when it times run, and then it turned into a complex system, right? So this is one way of thinking about generative art. But I guess what is interesting about this piece, and I love this piece, is because it brings in a different discourse around what does it mean by generativity. It's also not just only about rules and code, but also bringing in like people, social relations, infrastructure, care, and many other aspects. So my interest in working with Cornelia, or especially in this work, is, first of all, I think it's the love of this project that we have laid out in the book is that the book over time, or the project over time, generate different kinds of discourse. So obviously Cornelia sort of explained just now, like she's very interested in authorship and copyright issue. And I guess my perspective, how I enter the scene, is really the interest in the politics of technologies and infrastructure. And especially for this project, there were different versions. And she has worked with different programmers, like 5 or 6 programmers. So I'm also interested in different kinds of power dynamics between how she worked with the programmers and how she come up with these ideas. And also like how the style of the programmer actually changed the outcome of the project. So in that sense, I guess to sum up is I'm interested in your code aspect. But code is not from a very strict sense like source code, because I see code is more than just source code. Even fix my code, it seems like, oh, fixing one line and then we are done, right? But it's much more than fixing just a line of code, because it involves reading, writing, thinking with code, and also looking for different kinds of infrastructures and social relations. So I guess it's like the project also helps me to sort of dive into the politics of Google Search API. And as a way to help me to think, as a conceptual tool, I think we have also pointed out in the book as well, what kind of discourse might be generated, what kind of things that we want to raise through the dialogues that we have, and the experience of like finding out the solution, because we also approach different ways of fixing. So sort of like these ideas of more technological, social technological aspect that interests me to work with Cornelia. Yeah.
Cornelia, do you want to respond to that? What was your inclination to work with Winnie here?
Well, yeah, we met at Aarhus University, like a first conversation on the in the hall or on the floor, and then it's I don't know, we just kept continuing our conversation, because for me what was interesting is that I had a partner in Winnie, or I have a partner in Winnie, who really comes from a different background, also professional background, cultural background, and also from a different generation. And generation is important, I think, to mention, because I very much feel, and I'm often confronted with this, I feel so much like a 90s net artist, with these ideas about the internet. We kind of grew up with, or were socialized with, when the internet was new and or the web came up, and we had this, so we had so many utopian ideas about the internet. And that very much influenced my thinking about technology. And so we of course it's no longer like this, and I find it really hard to find ways to deal with the current situation, which is very dystopian, in fact, and to learn what is going on, and still find new ways of intervening and making comments and so on. And so with Winnie, it's I don't know, it's hard to explain. It's just a mutual interest in a very natural conversation we kept up, and we kept going on many different things. And I think what became very clear and very obvious is that our two different expertises, which also based on different experiences and life experiences as artists, if we start talking about it and exchanging and thinking together about problems, that produces quite a unique form of knowledge, which cannot be produced otherwise. If each of us would sit down and study and try to write up things in an academic way, it would not be the same as what we achieve and produce in our dialogical situation. And I think we both enjoy that very much.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot. I want to follow up indeed what Mark Marina here in the chat also mentioned indeed, and what you said, Winnie, is that the style of coding and how that changes and how it also affects in a way the work. And I mean, you said indeed you saw the work by different programmers. It has indeed been done with different people. How do you see that as affecting the work?
I think especially for the net.art generator project, it is highly interesting in terms of fixing the code, because what I was fixing is actually something that is not quite apparent in the surface, in the interface. So it's really at the code level to make it work in a way. So, and Cornelia doesn't want to change the interface so much, right? So in a way, I have this kind of constraint. So which means that I have to dig into the previous programmer who worked with the code and also learn the style that he wrote the code, right? And I also think like doing programming or this kind of technical work is it's not like having just one way of doing it. There are so many different ways to solve a very particular problem, for example. Right? So going through the previous programmer work make me also realize how he think about, like how he broke the task into a smaller steps. And also I saw a lot of comments, like some kind of annotation around the code. So I kind of aware I also mentioned in the book as well, there was something that were apparent, like he was testing a lot of different visual effects. But then at the end, he just chosen like a 13 effects out of like 20, for example, right? So there was a clear indicator that there was a cautious decision making there, right? So of course, this is one way of like understanding the style of coding, and also like to learn the style that he wrote, so that I also follow this style of writing, because I don't want to deviate so much. I guess it's also, I have this kind of preservation or research perspective that I want to leave all the traces at the code level so that other can build upon and also can read upon without so much difference in a way. So this is one way. And of course, it's the Perl language as well. It also something that interests me, because different programming language also facilitate or afford different forms of features, or good at certain things and maybe less strong in certain things, you know. So it also interests me in a way to dig into the culture of Perl and why it was a thing, you know, in the late 90s, so many programmers, especially web developers, working with this language. So for me, it's interested in many different layers, from the environment of the programming language itself, and especially in contrast to what I'm using nowadays. And I have really no clue on Perl, and so I have to learn from scratch and start to see the difference between the programming language, as well as like the source code level that indicate the style of a particular thoughts of a programmer. Yeah.
So essentially, it didn't really change that much to the interface, but it was much more for you as a sort of like, well, that's the authentic sort of coding that I want to adhere to, that I want to preserve in some sort of way. Was that important to you, Cornelia?
Yeah, I had some thoughts also regarding the question you asked before, you know, what kept me going for so long time. And I think it's really important to understand this project on the two levels of this project. The one is the actual code level, and you consider it as a finished project, which is online and working, and it does its little job to make collages. You know, that's so that could be like, you know, the artwork. But at the same time, it has this other level, which is the conceptual level, or its function as a conceptual tool, which goes way beyond the simple technical level and intervenes in different discourses at different times. And I think what was particularly interesting at the time when I joined up with Winnie was that the reason why it was broken at the time was the interface to the Google Search API, and that made us embark on this exploration of search engine and search engine politics, and through this functionality or dysfunctionality of the API, which immediately takes this work, what you can say it was created in 97, but all of a sudden it produces a discourse which is very contemporary. And I think that is this kind of interesting and weird ability of this little project, you know, that it constantly comes up with new problems or new interfaces or entry points to very contemporary discourses. If it always would just be the same little program from 97, I think I would not be so much interested anymore 25 years later. But I have experienced so many interesting interventions and encounters through what this program does, or, you know, the consequences it creates. And that's why, and we are sure that this is not the last one, you know, we're just looking forward, excited to see what the next thing is that will come up.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm also looking forward to what the next thing is going to be. But to come back indeed to the something that you said also in the book about repair and care, and that is about, you refer to the maintenance in a way and to the repair as an act of care, and which you also then relate to techno-feminist praxis.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm quite curious indeed if you could elaborate a little bit on that. What is this techno-feminist praxis to you? How is it different from a regular practice? Or what is a regular practice in this?
Yes, I don't know what a regular practice is. I think techno-feminist is regular practice.
Sure.
Well, for me, when I talk about techno-feminism, it implies two crucial points. One is that technology is not neutral, and that technology always implies and produces power relations and that are gendered, highly gendered. And this is the same as it was, I don't know, 30 years ago or 50 years ago. And not exactly the same, but in the big tendency it is. So that towards this background, I think if you start working with programmers, for example, it is interesting because technical competence always comes also with an authority and with a certain kind of power. And for me, technofeminism does not mean that I need to learn everything myself and I need to know everything, which is impossible anyway. So it always comes with this question, you know, how much do I have to know? How much skills do I actually have to have? But also with this question, what does it mean if I'm collaborating with someone who has more power or more skills, and what is it, what happens, and how can we address this in a good way, and how can we deal with this in a better way than it is usually handled? And at this, I think everyone who has ever had to do anything with hacker scene or digital underground knows exactly what I'm talking about, you know, this kind of communication culture which is there. And luckily there is more and more initiatives, like also queer feminist hack spaces and spaces that that have realized this sort of gender related communication and power imbalance, and that try to do things really differently. And this had a lot to do with how, you know, how what do you use your knowledge for? Do you use your knowledge to produce power, to impose power, or do you share your knowledge, you know? And the simple slogans from hacker culture like RTF, read the fucking manual if you don't know something, tells everything, you know, because people had to learn it the hard way themselves. So they want everyone else to learn it the hard way, you know. It's not about sharing skills. And so that is for me central, you know, to kind of find a good way to work together while understanding and realizing the power relations and differences that are there. And when it comes to the work with the net.art generator, of course, it's not just fixing, but it's also about fixing so that it works again. But it's more this taking care of something, feeling responsible. And in this case of the net.art generator, it's quite interesting because what the ZKM bought is actually the server, which is a sculpture or an object on which free software is running. So what we were working with was the free software, which is running on the server. So it's kind of a, you know, mixed situation. One part of the work is owned by ZKM, another part is owned by the people who take care of free software, you know. So who in the end will feel responsible to fix it or to use resources and also, yeah, have the skills to do this kind of work. And in our case, it turned out that because there's also another version of this free software running on our own server. When it stopped working, that we got interested in this process of finding out what is going on, how can we resolve this, how can we best deal with it, make the not just fix it, but also make the problem visible, and with that also make the infrastructure visible, which is behind this and causing the problem. And so when we had, and it took quite a while, this process, and when we eventually were there to have agreed on a solution, Winnie and me, we approached ZKM and we met Mathieu, and he was also just about to start to think about this problem. So I think it turned into a very nice collaboration in the end between people who are inside the institution and take care inside and use the resources, and the two of us who are basically outside of this institution. Yeah.
Well, I think one thing I might add on to this kind of responsibility, we are also very much influenced by the project, the Feminist server by Constance Femke Snelting. I've been also thinking about what does it mean by providing a service like net.art generator. If you think about it as a software service, to what extent, like from a feminist perspective, like we have to maintain it, and also what kind of service level, right, that we have to provide, and why we have to provide in this way, and who are also like what kind of conditions that allow, because like for Cornelia and I, we are both sort of have our other jobs to do as well, right? So a lot of the time when net.art generator fans send an email to us saying it's not working, it's not working again, it's kind of frustration, right? Having this kind of frustration. So which also keeps me thinking about, so what kind of resources that we have to put in. And of course, like because of the love of the project, we continuously maintain it. But also from the feminist perspective is that like, it's not something that we want to offer as like to position or promise is something that is ready, perfect solution here, right? Mm-hmm. But as a way, as a conceptual tool to think about what does it mean by maintenance, what kind of resource, what kind of care and love that we need to put in, right? And also not just only us, but also the love around people who are using net.art generator as well, right? The tolerance level of not having the service available.
Yeah. Oh, thanks a lot. And that brings me indeed to our other two discussants here, Morgan and Mathieu. I would really like to hear also your point of view from your perspective as an organization and working with the organization, having to deal with this work that you know is valuable and that you'd like to work on. But how did that work when Cornelia and Winnie came to you and it's like, oh, well, here we go. Here's a package, and would you accept it? What was your response to that?
It was actually a coincidence. We started to work on net.art generator for the collection exhibition, and we received the letter from Cornelia, and it was really like, it's the best thing ever. She's contacting us, and she's also talking about more than just taking care of NAG, but also like really making it political and really like a full project, and she had it all done. So we always think with Mathieu that conservation should be distributed, so never be just in the hands of two person in a museum, but in everybody's hands. And since NAG is also on GitHub and is also available on Cornelia's website, it was only fair that it comes from the outside and not exactly from inside. And I wanted also to say that the work from Winnie and Cornelia is really exemplary for us, because this is what's we're gonna go through in the future, like going into someone else's code, like deep studying of someone else's code to fix it. This is something we are going to do, Mathieu is going to do in the future for most of the artworks that are has been bought a long time ago. And yeah, it's this is like an example of what's what's going to happen to all the museums. And it's inspiring, of course, for us. Mathieu, if you want to add something, because you're going inside the code of someone right now.
yeah, but actually you basically summed up what was the what I wanted to say about that, is that of going into someone else's code, and it's properly made with comments, and you can read it like a book. Actually, it's very nice. Yeah.
I'm also quite curious because you mentioned now indeed that you see conservation as something distributed, and also in the book you talk about folk preservation, Morgan, and Mathieu, you talk about crowdsourcing, and Cornelia and Winnie are also talking about, well, there's this collaborative efforts. I would really like to hear more from all of you in a way. It's like, well, what does that actually mean? Who is really doing the work, and how is this sort of agency between these different actors really shared in a way? And particularly, of course, also from the organizational point of view, how do you actually deal with this sort of distributive agency, and who gets the power in the end?
Mathieu, do you want to?
Well, the crowdsource API actually was Winnie and Cornelia's idea. So maybe you want to start first.
I can say something about this. Or Cornelia, you want to go?
No, you go.
Okay. So I guess there's maybe one missing point in the about the book is really important to address the fact that why I came into why I joined this project primarily is because the Google image search API changed and didn't work, right? And they have changed. I mean, Google has changed this API in a way that we can't use it for unlimited image search, and also it requires developers or artists or designer have to register a particular key in order to use it. So we take the approach of using the free version, which come with a limitation, with just only 100 free requests. And this is a deliberate decision to do it in this way with a limitation. And then for users who are using it and then no more, sorry, you have to wait for another day. So the idea of crowdsourcing is really coming from like thinking about like how to we think about the possibility of involving public audience or other people who might join this project to think about the politics of APIs or technologies and infrastructure. So the Crowd API is sort of like a prototype project with Garrett, our server admin, and Cornelia. So because of the key, every Google search API key with just only 100 request limits. So if we just imagine, right, speculate a little bit, right? If we have how many audience now? 39 audience are watching the YouTube streaming, right? So if every one of you sort of register with your key and everyone got like 100 requests free. So if the program are able to detect for like this, already reached the limit for the first key, then we automatically switch to the second one and then the third one. So in that sense, that's the idea of crowdsourcing the key in order to keep the project running as a way to think through what are the politics there with this kind of limitation. So that's the background. Yeah. Yeah. Colleague,
and the interesting thing about this is, of course, that this is a project we didn't realize yet, but we wanted to realize in collaboration with an institution, because it would also confront the institution with the fact that it's not according to the terms of use of Google, of course. So it's like producing this sort of tensions, and kind of legal tensions and decision making. Does any institution want to take the responsibility to infringe against the terms of use of Google? What kind of consequences would it have, or what does it mean if it's done basically as a performative act, which it is in the end? It's not about not so much about just producing being able to use more search requests, but it's about performing the limitation, and then see what this discourse produces. And also, Winnie mentioned Gerrit as our sysadmin. I think we did not talk so much about him yet. Also, he's also very famous in the book. It was a coincidence that we started collaborating with him because he works at the company who hosts currently one version of the net.art generator, and it's also one of these coincidences, and out of which grew a really nice collaboration also. And he's much more than just a sysadmin, but really a collaborator now, and developed new features for the net.art generator. And I don't know if he's here. He should be somewhere around. Hi.
Yeah, but so Morgan and Mathieu, how do you, for instance, indeed start collaborating with Gerrit here? Will he be part of your team in a sense?
With who?
With who? I didn't understand.
With this system administrator that Cornelia and Winnie are now working with.
Matthew did collaborate with him, if I recall.
I briefly did, yeah, already.
Because I think one of the things that's always quite precarious in a way is indeed how organizations start collaborating with those beyond the institution. I think with these kinds of works, that's becoming more and more necessary because you can only do so much as an organization, and you are sort of depending indeed not merely only on the artist, but also on other expertise that is out there. And maybe even people you don't know yet, or who are not even connected to the project at all. And so, Morgan, I was quite really interested indeed in your notion of the sort of folk preservation, how you see that going from the institution.
We got inspired, of course, by video game and all this archive.org, and how a lot of people are just preserving heritage without an institutional background. And Mathieu is also part of this scene, so we just get interested in this when we started to have licenses issues on some artworks. And we were looking for pirates, that old pirates who were able to hack some of those licenses from the 90s for us, because they were not distributed anymore, the softwares. And this is how we started to think about how the different level of distributing conservation. And for software, it's sure that we have to look outside of institution, because we cannot look at industry. They won't really help. We saw it with Google. And so, yeah, we started to get interested in pirates first. And distributed also, a second level is between institutions, because I think all of the museums have resources, and if we all share those, maybe we are not going to spend super long time on something that someone already did. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to work on Reddit, we wanted to work with GitHub or other code sharing platforms to just share solutions that we are doing. And like the gallery feature of net.art generator is now on GitHub. Mathieu used it, our team changed it for our needs, so maybe we will just give you the new code, and everybody is working together for a better solution for this artwork. So yeah, two level between institution, but also outside of institution, because we won't be able to have all the skills, all the knowledge, and all the patch to hack software inside the ZKM.
Yeah, maybe just relating and spinning off of this is the issue of authorship that was mentioned already by Cornelia in the beginning of the discussion. What I found really interesting indeed is that also, Winnie, in the book you mentioned at a certain point that you called yourself a co-author within the project. And spinning up on that, Cornelia, and you go into the discussion indeed of like, indeed, who are the co-authors of the work? Could it indeed be also all kinds of programmers that were involved, but also the sort of non-human co-authors, like indeed Google or Yahoo, perhaps in the beginning. The infrastructure, the server, the network, how far can it go? So I'm quite interested in hearing about it, to tell a little bit more in what way these different authors relate to each other. Do they have a sort of equal say? Are they equally, is there a sort of hierarchy between them, or are they much more, differently used?
I think I can say something about it. So the first exploration I did regarding authorship was really to explore the question, who is the author of one of these automatically generated images in a very strict legal sense? Who could be called an author? And I was listing the user, of course, who has to enter a search term, the programmer. There is, of course, always also an original author, because we are not generating from scratch, but recombining material which already exists. There is also me playing a certain role, which is also in terms of authorship very unclear what my role is, and the code itself. And so to answer this, I wrote a legal expertise. So I took myself the freedom to write a legal expertise, which was driving some legal experts crazy, but they had to admit that it was correct, fact checking correct. The interesting thing was that if you look just through the legal lens, I can be excluded as an author, but it will only be people who are really involved in producing, actually, because I had just the idea, I just developed the concept, but it's the people who are actually involved in the production of the actual image who could be co-authors. So that was quite, that was a stage where I was interested in kind of showing the absurdity of legal thinking, because of course in the art world it's me who is being associated as being the creator or the author of this work, and to show this discrepancy and to perform this sort of things, I think that is mainly my interest. And we kind of revisited this expertise when in my dialogue with Winnie, and she said, you're totally prioritizing human authors, and by the way, you forgot so many, all these programmers that wrote libraries that we use and so on and so forth. And a lot, because it's an artwork that does not function not only without Google API, but we rely on an internet, on a network, on searches, on different interfaces where we make requests, where we get things in return, the same for the user. So it's actually a very complex technical system that is required, and it could be discussed or considered, or should at least be mentioned, that these images, which I like to call networked image, which is being produced, could not exist without all this many different collaborators and the very complex technical infrastructure, because it needs to be there all the time. Of course, I can extract one images and print it and hang it to the wall. That has a very different meaning then. But the idea is that there is a constant process of generating and making, basically an endless process.
I think for me is, I guess it's I'm not the one who wrote the author first on the source code. It's actually from Panos, the programmer who did the version 5 version. And because I, as a coder, I usually have a practice when I write my code. I have a lot of like saying when was the last update of the file, and also some contact points, so that when people who are experiencing difficulties, so that they can contact me, or make a push request on GitHub and so on. So because I saw his code comment saying like author create a last update, and also some information. So that's why I add this part as a way like to signify there's also an update of that. So it's more like keeping the log of like for research purpose and for preservation purpose.
This is what I wanted to say on softwares that Mathieu is working on. Usually is writing his name, and so the co-author is not like, it's really on a long time chronology. Like Mathieu worked on some patches from 1990, and he just being the co-author of a patch. And so in the software world, it's quite common to have multiple co-authors with 10 years apart, and yeah.
No, I think we have to consider that we operating in two different worlds, actually, because the world of coding and technology knows a lot about co-authorship and has a very clear system how you can also improve works, and you have versioning system and all that, which is not known in the art world. If I release an artwork and someone comes, oh, I have a way how to improve it, and we install a versioning system and then we collaborate on it. This is very unusual, but that is what interests me, is kind of also in a playful way, in a performative way, to transfer this thinking from the technical world into the art world, and to see what kind of frictions it produces.
Actually, this is arriving to museums because we start to think about versioning and co-authoring, and restorers are becoming co-author by restoring the artwork. So it's really arriving here, and thanks to people from the software world that are slowly coming to museums.
But it's still, and I think I saw this question by, I don't know, should I say something about that, by Mark?
By Mark, yeah, he indeed picks up on this really well, really nicely indeed, and how the net.art generator is actually also forked, how the code has been going on to different projects perhaps, and whether that actually implicates the net.art generator. How do you take that into account?
Oh, I have a different question. I'm somewhere else. So,
are you reading the one on NFT, I guess?
Yes. No, trying to skip that one.
Okay.
No, but I think it's interesting. Can I read it, Annette? The one.
Yeah, Mark asks, are you aware of anyone who has forked this code for other projects? And how do those relate back to the net.art generator and its goals?
I know that people downloaded the code and were asking questions about it, but I've never seen anything that has been done with it. I think it's the important thing is really for me that it's there and that it's possible. I mean, that's the other thing with free software. I mean, free software means a potentiality. It's an open source that people can change and can modify, and then have to share again under the same conditions. But at the same time, I think in the art world there is probably not so many people who are actually able to do that, and also I can imagine that it's not so popular for an artist to download and modify someone else's code instead of creating your own, where you can say, I made this project, instead of saying, oh, I modified Cornelia's project. So for me, the important thing that it is actually there, and it implies kind of rethinking the questions of how much is it also transferable, these ideas, of co-authorship, of open code, of source. I mean, of course, open source code makes a lot of sense when it comes to programming, but how can you exactly transfer this thinking into the cultural field, into the art world, is a very, very difficult question. And I think all these questions we talked about already before about authorship and originality, they also touch upon it, and it's for good reason that the art world till now has its difficulties, let's put it like this, with digital works. It's about the market, it's about sellability, it's about originality. They just want an original, and if they got an original certificate, an NFT, then they are happy with it. The thing is, it must be original. And as long as it's not, it's not of interest.
This comes exactly to Mark's second question, indeed, where he asks, indeed, is art on the net has taken a strange but maybe not unpredictable turn with NFTs, the non-fungible tokens, though it long predates them. Do you think, indeed, net art generator speaks to this moment in the online digital artwork too? And it's also something that
yes, of course, definitely. I mean, that is the next thing, We are preparing the NFT just to let everyone know who wants to bid on it. Of course, it's very telling, and I was a bit skeptical when this first happened. This AI generated artwork that was sold by Christie's about 2 years ago or a bit more. I thought, well, this is, the art market tries to launch something to create a hype, but then, they didn't put any more energy in it. This is like the next attempt, where a big auction house is involved to create a market. And it's all, it's an attempt to create a market. And I'm very interested in that conceptually. What do they do? How do they try to convince people that they can have an original, something that is original and still relates to digital art? I think this is conceptually extremely interesting. And the question is, if you, as a buyer or as a collector, you need to understand this conceptual level of what you're doing, I think, in order so that it makes sense, I think, I don't know. I don't know enough about this world, but I've seen people who bought some of my works understanding that I would not sign them, that it's part of the work that she doesn't sign it, and then I said, okay, they understand what it's about, so I'm happy to sell it. So it's all about, playing this game. It's a game. It's a big game with art and the art market in particular. And the question is if there is enough potential and enough interest for people to invest into variations of this game and attract enough attention. It's also about attention. At the moment, there's a lot of attention around that. We'll see how long it will keep up. I'm around in this business for quite long, and I've seen a lot of attempts coming and going. So I'm happy and open to everything. Let's see.
Can we do a first edition of the ebook? It's now for free, and you never know what's going to happen next.
You can do anything. You just need to find a way how to sell it.
Yeah, so I can see we have many layers. We started with many layers, and we continue to have multiple layers coming in the future as well. I'm afraid we're ending actually here because our time is limited at the moment, unfortunately. Unless there's very urgent things that you still want to say, because that's really what this is about. Zetka, I invited you indeed to tell the things that you still always wanted to tell but never did. Is there a last remark that you want to make?
Well, for me, thinking about also today, the launch of this book and Fix My Code, I try to avoid this misunderstanding. For me, it's really not so much about preservation. I don't think that this artwork has to be preserved forever and has to be fully functional all the time. For me, what is really important is that we can use the artwork for a long time to show its dependencies, to perform certain structures and power structures, even if it's not working, or particularly when it's not working. But that requires a different level of discourse, discursivity, of interest also of institutions to support this kind of discourses. And So that's something that I would like to emphasize. You know, it's not about fixing things and making them work, but talking about this, you know, having a level on which we can commonly together reflect on the structures we are embedded in and we are so dependent on. I think that's really the important thing. And I totally appreciate at this point the openness of ZKM to enable and to give space to this discourse.
Great, thank you very much. So I can give the last word then to Margit, please.
So all I can do now is to thank you very much, Cornelia, Winnie, Morgan, Mathieu, Janine, and Anne. Thank you for this truly very interesting conversation. I've learned a lot about your work and the whole frame of reflection developed over the last decades, I would also almost say. And it really touched upon a lot of important issues. The collections at KM will be concerned in the long run. Also the importance of sharing resources, of sharing solutions, and pursuing that path of distributed conservation, and actually to continue, because I always mix up conservation and conversation, of continuing this conversation on conservation. And yeah, thank you so much. And I'm very much looking forward, together with Morgane and Mathieu and the other colleagues who couldn't be here today, to pursue the work with you and also to stay in contact with you, Annette and Janine. Thank you very much to all of you who were watching, and have a very nice evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.